What's going on, Soul Tribe? I salute the divinity in you. And welcome to my channel, Alchemist. Justin here, and are you ready to get into them lunar shenanigans? 'Cause you know what? This I think is a pretty balanced week overall. Like this, got some good pockets there. It's got a little challenging pocket there. Saturn, Saturn. What you gonna do with them? And then there's even like there's one little pocket that's particularly busy. We do got one kind of jam-packed day that we're going to get into there. But before we jump into that, if you're new here, again, my name is Justin, and one of the things I do in this channel is talk about the lunar shenanigans, and that just goes over the astrology of the moon, and what sign it's in, what phase it's in, when it happens to go void of course, and to get a feel of the week as the moon is sort of distributing these energies and having these conversations with the different celestial bodies there, because love that good old moon. It's really close and connected with us, and I think following those lunar transits can be very informative for us as individuals and for a collective. So, but I'm going to be going over the week of October 21st to the 27th. We're almost in November. So let's get into this thing here. And you know what I like about this, because it happened on the 21st of October, that's a Tuesday. We're starting off with the new moon. Starting off with the new moon in Libra, and that's going to happen at specifically because I got the chart for the moon entering Scorpio there. But before it does that, that conjunction is going to happen at about 5:25 a.m. and that's going to be Pacific time. And the new moon is when the sun and the moon have that, when they're conjunct one another, when they're in the same sign, same sign, same degree. And the conjunction is a fusion of energy. And when you think about this is the sun, which is the higher light of the mind, the soul energy fusing with the body. There's this. I think this is always a great time to really take a minute to get centered. The moon's returning to the heart of the sun. And it does that every month. We get this gift of just being regulated with self and then wanting to, what is a new intention? And now that we're starting this new moon cycle, the moon up until the full moon is really promoting that sense of growth. So this is a time to be kind of fostering things and think about the things that are wanting to come to fruition. And it's always really cool to watch as I've been actually thinking about this. I lucked up on the place that we're at here, and I got a view of the horizon, and I'm able to see the planets rise each day, when they're happening. I've been watching Venus actually get ready to go under the beams of the sun here soon, but it's interesting when those celestial bodies get obscured from view by the sun, and it goes through that sense of renewal of essentially it's getting burned up once it gets under the beams, and it's almost like this clarity. It can be maybe a bit of an intense time, but it's this purification by fire with the sun. The sun is this enlivening energy. If you just ever get out just to watch the sunrise, how invigorating that can be, and that's what I really imagine that moon conjunction could be, is just that sense of the sun and just really just kind of illuminating things, the promise of a new dawn, when we're coming into this. And I think that's a cool feeling and a good thought, with that moon in Libra. But I think that's a good thought to carry into as we move into the moon, moving into Scorpio. And that's going to happen at about 8:42 a.m. Pacific time. I got the chart up here for that one. Now, this is a bit of a tricky one here, because this is where the moon finds itself in its fall. When a celestial body is in its fall, that just means that it's not that it can't function, but it's a bit harder for the moon to do what it does. Because it was interesting, because I was thinking about the idea of like the pregnancy process and the birthing process when you think about the moon and like conception, because how it's very different, how the moon moves water compared to how Mars rules water or moves water, being that it's the traditional ruler of Scorpio. And Scorpio is the fixed water sign, the receptive or yin in nature. And even compared to like how Jupiter moves water. I like to think of it as, when you think of the moon, that's all the nurturing properties of water. The moon is where it's going to be in charge of like the womb, and the stomach and the breast, all of those things that are nourishing things. Whereas Mars, the way Mars moves water is appropriate too. It keeps us alive, because Mars, but it's going to be more of a kind of forceful thing when I think of sweating when I'm thinking about how Mars moves water, and that usually requires either some sort of like activity, whether it be exercise, or this could be a sense of like panic or fear. maybe it's coming up with that. And then even thinking about like, we go into the bathroom, those are martial ways of moving water, things that can't wait sometimes, and, things that, or they get painful when we're talking with Mars. And so this is why I think the moon, having to move through those waters in Scorpio, it could just be a bit rougher because it's, water is impressionable. And I think that water energy is not that, I think that sometimes when people think about Scorpio, they automatically think just trauma. And I don't, it's that Scorpio and I'd say all water placements. I know that when I have a certain feeling or something, I may not be able to tell you all the nitty gritty details about something, but I could tell you about how something made me feel. Absolutely. I won't forget that. And I think that even holds even deeper for Scorpio placements, because it's like one of those things that feeling is imprinted. It's hard to let that go, because especially if it's like one that was a more challenging feeling, because you never want to feel that again. And so that's where I think the moon sometimes can have troubles with this, can have troubles having troubles moving through these waters. Because I think that Scorpio, I'd like to think when I get, when there's Scorpio stuff happening in my chart like there is right now. You see, we got all this Scorpio energy right now. Mars and Mercury are just separating from that conjunction that they just had. So there still could be, the energies could still be riled up right now. So this would be something where I always suggest, really dipping into the body and thinking about how, especially like with Mars, for example, Mars can be sort of like pungent or like bitter in taste. So eating like maybe like spicy foods, or maybe even just like dark chocolate can be a really good one, because that bitterness can pull you out of the emotions and get you into the body. And it's like, okay, I was able to swallow that. That sucked. But now, like, okay, now I'm feeling a little more grounded in this, whatever this feeling is. What can I do to move through it, and whatever that feeling may be. So I find that the moon and Scorpio can really help one develop a deeper sense of emotional intelligence. And I think that's going to be very important, especially just why we still have all this water. And it's going to be even more once Venus and the Sun enter into Scorpio as well. There's just going to be really just a preponderance of Scorpio energy for a bit. So we're going to need to be able to move through that kind of porousness there, because we got a lot coming up here. So let's talk about not yet. It's building. And that's something that I want to kind of focus on as well. A lot of the times when we're thinking about these transits, because we get into Wednesday here, the 22nd of October, moon's still in Scorpio, we're in that waxing crescent phase now. But when we're moving through, there's no exact aspects that the moon is going to be forming this day. I have the chart set here to about 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. And it's knowing that in these days, because the moon is building up, as you can see here now, is in a really tight conjunction. If you're looking at the chart, it's this real tight conjunction between Mars, Mercury here in Scorpio. And so there's this, little intense pocket that's going to be building up. So even though there's not any aspects that are happening here, again, be mindful of how we're flowing through these emotions here. Because now, and happy birthday to you if your son's in Scorpio here. Now sun's just entered here now. So now we got 4 planets. Well, we got 6 planets. We're talking Sun and the Moon, and the other ones minus Venus, all in water signs right now. So this is a lot of emotional energy that's building up here. And then we get to Thursday, the 23rd of October. And before the moon enters into Sagittarius, like I said, the moon's going to first form a conjunction with Mars. And that moon-Mars kind of combinations, I think on a less constructive end, can be just like really intense emotions. It can be not letting things go, taking things too far, let's be manipulative, kind of calculated, like there's a more trickier energy, because Scorpio has a deep intuition, and it has a deep, be able to pick up. It's a real sharp sign. I think that's something to pay attention to. I think you could, sometimes when we think about water, we can think of just only the emotions and the feeling things, but to be able to sense when something's off, to be able to feel that. Scorpions, and again, I need to verify this, but Scorpions, I've heard, can feel the vibrations of things approaching in the ground, and it's just like, what am I feeling? Do I need to get the poison ready? Or is this, what's that? How are we coming? And that's something too, pay attention to how these feelings stir up in the mind as well, because then right after the moon talks to Mars, it's going to high five Mercury too, who's still in that, real tight orb to Mars. And so this would be one where, yeah, just kind of, and not to look at yourself with judgment either. I just observe how sometimes we can, there was a lot of people out not too long ago. And sometimes like you see how that collective energy, especially when you're wanting things to move, can really influence you. So pay attention to how certain emotions, and how certain feelings, or what maybe you find yourself kind of focusing on. This is a time where, because I think that coming with this sense of mindfulness, really kind of coming with an awareness of oneself and how one is moving, Mars, and being just really intentional how you're moving, then that really creates I think we're able to then, with that moon trining Jupiter, discern who our enemies are versus who our allies are. And not that, I'd say that there's people out to get to us, but, I think that it's more so, sometimes in the thick of emotions, we can lash out to other people who may have our best intentions, and that could be a friend, that could be a family member, that could be a partner. So I think that when we, again, just come with that, yeah, emotional intelligence, I think, with Mars, and just kind of really kind of focus on how we're moving. I think that creates a deeper sense of camaraderie, and I think that creates a deeper, because what I think Scorpio too, and I'm just talking as an energy, wants that sense of trust, wants to know that when I'm going through these kind of vulnerable times, when I'm feeling these things that I'm doing, or that I'm feeling, that I have a safe space to express them in a healthy, and have someone to help me find that, a way to navigate these feelings, and to have those people that I trust when I think about this kind of moon trining Jupiter here. And it is something with that moon trining Saturn. It's not going to be easy. I'm not saying that it's just like a magic pill and we just all get along. It's emotions are tricky. They can be, and it's like, and sometimes we can lash out just in the moment, just be really kind of quick, and it just didn't mean to, and that's not to say that that's right. I just had a moment where I'm in a Mercury year, Mercury was squaring my ascendant in Scorpio, and I had a small bit of a I had some words to say about with someone, but it was one of those things that while I was talking about it, I was just like, listen, and I understand that I'm speaking from a very emotional place, and I'm just like, but this is just where I'm at right now. And it's just like, if we want to continue this conversation, it's going to be emotions. But otherwise, if we want to wait for a little bit, like, yeah, I'm going to feel some type of way. So, but I think that just being able to remove oneself, to kind of take a step back sometimes from the emotion. Because one thing I wanted to mention kind of astronomically too, that it's been kind of pulling into my attention, and I've just been kind of meditating on it. But when you think about astronomically, when celestial bodies are close to or furthest away from the Earth, the moon is in its apogee right now, when it's furthest away from the Earth. And that's why I was really kind of meditating on what kind of significations that can mean. And that's, for me, one that was kind of coming up again, kind of taking a step back, especially even when we're seeing maybe even people too, when we notice that someone's in a mood. This may not just be just something that we're all experiencing, just you personally, but it could be just your people around you. And it's just like, oh, they seem a little snappier than normal. And because, I think with the moon, the moon could be associated with like the countenance. So looking at facial expressions, people's face tell it all. But sometimes I think that too can invite people to create that space for people to let down that facade, maybe. If that's something where if you're used to, because, maybe people could either hide it through just being just kind of stone faced, or people can hide it through a smile. I've been guilty for that. But it can just create a deeper awareness of each other. I think with this, even that moon trining Saturn there, kind of retrograde. So that's even something that's just kind of coming up, but paying a deeper observation of one another. I think there can be almost this aversion sometimes to looking even each other in the eye, for fear of seeing something deeper, for allowing something deeper. The eyes are like the windows to the soul. So just something that's been yeah, just some things to just kind of contemplate on. And then we get out of that heaviness. We move on to when the moon moves into Sagittarius at about 9:18 p.m. And now the moon, is feeling light. We got some fire, thank goodness. And then things are just kind of, and that's what I think the moon in Sag can be, just a revitalizing after that martial energy. When I was talking about that ideas of how the celestial bodies move through water, the way that Jupiter would do it, that's the actual kind of like the childbirth, the kind of the release from all that tension, from all the process that is, and now the new life starts, the adventure starts. Let's go begin anew. And the nice thing I always like about now, at least with this period of time too, is not necessarily by aspect, but at least I like when the moon and Jupiter, they're in mutual reception to one another, and that's really nice. They're at least in each other's domicile, so those themes are going to be really kind of closely related to one another. So there's at least that kind of loose connection there between the moon and Big Papa. So that's always really nice with this when we got a moon in Sag. But that to me is, but let me mention, Sag is they're ruled by Jupiter, and they're the mutable fire sign, active or yang in nature. And to take these things that you've been feeling to, I always think that every time we get through the waters of Scorpio, it's just like, okay, how do we, where we've met ourselves deep, we've moved through these things, we've had the courage to face these, maybe the kind of challenging emotions. Now, what's the gift from that? What's the abundance? What did I get from that experience? How do I take this out there and share this inheritance, this legacy that I have with others? So, I think that's where that Sag is very generous, can be very giving and just abundant, So I love that energy. And then, looks like my screen is messed up a little bit. Hold on one second. All right, we're back. We went on a little adventure there. But so then we get into Friday, the 24th of October. Moon's still in a waxing crescent phase, and I got this chart up here for watching. Got about again. But I've been putting them about at 11:59. By 9 p.m. the moon's at about 13 degrees of Sag. And look at this, we're at a green day now, because like I was saying, the moon is building up here building up a nice energy here. So this could be, again, we've all moved through these waters, so now this can be a great time for us to, especially if you've maybe been in a sense of, maybe you've been just a bit reclusive, or just kind of needed just some isolation, just some time to process some things. This could be a great time to get out and do something, to go make some kind of connections, because then we get to Saturday, the 25th of October. Still waxing, still in Sag, and the moon is forming a sextile with Venus. And then when you think about the sextile, this is when, and I haven't been explaining these, the moon, that's when the planets are 60 or about 60 degrees apart from one another. Oh, and something to think about too. If you have, so let me backtrack a little bit. When the moon's going through Scorpio, especially if you have a lot of fixed placements, that's going to be Scorpio, Aquarius, Taurus, or Leo. That may be more active time for you, that like it is always for me. I have just a bunch of fixed placements. Other than my lights, everything's in a fixed placement. So those are always active times, and that could be really great information for just if you don't watch anything else, just watching the moon. That could be a great way of telling what's coming, like what you're feeling and what you're sensing. When you're going through your day-to-day. Now, when the moon's in Sag, that's going to shift. If you have a lot of mutable placements, that's Sagittarius, Pisces, Gemini, or Virgo, this one may be a more active time for you, just because that's where the moon is going to be forming more kind of harder aspects. So just something to keep in mind there. But you know what? If you've been feeling roughness, go call a friend. Go call a friend, because Venus is trying to make things better. Because the sextile is similar to like the trine energy, like I was talking with Big Papa and Saturn, but it's more so, it's a little bit weaker than the trine. It's something that requires a bit more initiative, but creates this collaborative energy. It creates this, it's Venusian in nature. It's creates this sense of opportunities that can happen there. This can just create general pleasantness. This can be going out for a picnic, or I don't know how many people picnic. This could be just going out and just doing something, not really even planning anything. Sag is just, let's just live for the moment. We'll think on our feet as we go. We'll get creative. Venus and Libra. This could be just even having like a phone call, having like some kind of engaging something, someone to breathe some life. Tell me about about your experiences. I've been just kind of eating it. I need to live vicariously through somebody else. Tell me some good news. That could be something, something like that. But I think that this is a time to welcome in more laughter with Venus. It's a time to feel good with Venus. If you've ever seen Venus and the moon in the sky together, it's always a beautiful sight. I got a few pictures of that, and I can't get over it. It really is something splendid. And so that's something, I think, to go do something splendid. Go appreciate nature. Go do something that feels good for the body. Go buy a new cologne. Go buy some perfume. Go buy a new shirt. Go buy a bracelet. Get a ring. Go see some flowers. Go appreciate some art. Go sit outside. All the Venusian things. The Moon Venus stuff is just very nourishing, very lovely, very just nice. Just nice. It makes things just a lot easier, just ease. I like, we like Venus. We like Venus transit. So, I've been in a Venus year. I've been eating it up. So let's eat it up because we're going to need it for Sunday. Fill up. Because then when we get to the 26th of October, then, before the moon moves into Capricorn, the moon first is going to have a square with Saturn. Saturn can be just a downer. It can on just a less constructive end. It can be this sense of just like feeling this everything's blocked, that there are obstacles wherever you're going. It can lead to and whether it can just lead to laziness, sluggishness, just a lack of motion. Everything there's just such inertia with Saturn. It feels like it's like trying to run underwater, especially with Saturn being in Pisces. This is like that moon trying to be alive and trying to do all these things, but then the reality still, or like another reality hits. You still got this problem that you need to deal with. Like, okay, like you could realize that maybe, I need to get out of this relationship, or I need to get out of this job, I need to get out of this thing, but then there's still going to be something else, and that's where it's like Saturn, where I think that Moon Saturn stuff, and this is where again I was just talking with someone about this. They were saying they were feeling this heaviness, and this was even without knowing their birth time. Saturn's in Pisces, and they have a lot of Gemini placements, and they have Saturn in Gemini being one of them. And so I was just like, in general, when you're feeling that sense of heaviness, I even found when I was in, I had through annual perfections, I was just in a long period because I do perfections from my sect-light and from the ascendant. I was just in a long chapter of Saturn. But I found during that period of time, and I wasn't necessarily intentionally doing this at the time. This was before I kind of got more into the kind of traditional techniques. But again, Saturn can be astringent in taste. And so doing things that are more like acidic, like citrus fruits. I found that I was making a lot of fruit bowls, just things that are sitting underneath the sun, so that I could just take all that sunlight and just eat it up. Just eat it up. And sometimes that sort of like that sourness, that pucker, just like, again, it pulls you out of your emotions and out of those things, and again, back into the body. Spicy things could be another thing to get stuff moving with that. Ginger, is one that I was thinking about, for example. It's got a bit of sweetness sometimes, especially if you get like candied ginger. It could be a little sweet, get a little spicy there. Just a nice kind of mix, just something to help the body, move some of that energy along, to bring back some fire, because Mars is cold right now in Pisces. It's just like being in the just like in the middle of just like the Antarctic or something. But I think that this too, sometimes with Saturn allows us to stop and sit with ourselves, especially when we do find ourselves stuck in those emotions. I think that when we meet ourselves deeper, when we find those things and face, because Saturn can be those things that are concealed from us, that are held secret, that are maybe been running things from behind the scenes, when we feel like we've been just something's taken over us. That's why Saturn finds its joy in the house of bad spirit. Just that voice that just wants to just tell us to stop. But when we face that voice and face the facts, where it's just like, you don't run this show, I do. This is maybe some external things that are going on, but when I go within, that moon sextiling the sun, that next aspect that it'll form. Or actually, hold on, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Before the moon does that, it's going to enter into Saturn's house, and that's going to be of Capricorn, and that's going to happen at about 9:53 3 a.m. Pacific time. In the moon in Capricorn, this is where the moon finds itself in its detriment. So we've been kind of the moons over this period of days have been really kind of going through the the house of, this is the malefics part of the chart. And so this is where, this, again, it's not that the moon can't do anything in Capricorn, but it has a harder time. The ground, the moon is exalted in Taurus, and it's used to those kind of lush fields of Taurus, whereas in Capricorn we're working more so kind of like in a tundra, where we're maybe growing more kind of root vegetables and things like that, where maybe the resources may be a bit more scarce, where we may not have as much to work with, you know but I think that a moon in Capricorn is resourceful. It can make one very practical. It can make one responsible. It can help, it can help you to find support. It can help make okay, these are the resources I need. Who do I need to connect with in order to get those things, and what can I offer them in exchange for that? Saturn's business savvy. Saturn rules the land and the things, and I think that sometimes too, when we get in heavy Saturn things, sometimes getting outside and just getting a win, doing something that, whether it's just like getting up and brushing your teeth, depending on how deep you got in it, go take a shower, go clean the house, go straighten up something. Sometimes those wins, those practical things, those moon and Capricorn things that we don't want to do, but we have a responsibility for those material things, because Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. They're the cardinal earth sign, receptive or yin in nature. And so this is looking at, because even when we're feeling some type of way, life still requires us to keep moving. The body still needs maintenance. The house still needs maintenance. Everything still needs maintenance. And that's the weight of Capricorn. Everything, the physical, the responsibility. Can't just escape in the emotions all the time, escape in the good feels. We have to do something. We have to move them and make tangible things. That's what the moon does. The moon is trying to ground things, for us to get our fortune, to build our fortune in things. So sometimes even just getting out amongst people, maybe that could be something with the moon, and maybe like if you've been feeling kind of isolated, just that maybe not necessarily socializing with people, but being around people who are in motion, kind of taking that receptive side of Capricorn. How do I get to where maybe, if you've been maybe feeling a bit of a rut, how do I get back to where I'm getting into tackling the everyday like this, like where I'm getting back to, and then again, it's like the moon's getting in Capricorn. What I like about a moon in Capricorn too, it's sometimes it'll put its feelings aside, or can really step outside of its feelings for a moment, to kind of be like, what, even though I'm feeling all these things, again, I still got to get all this stuff done, and sometimes it's like I would like to just be in my emotions, but again, we can, I think, find ways to kind of do both, like it's to, finding, again, in doing the self-care things and taking care of the responsibilities, that is helping us in a way, getting some wins to feel better too. It's kind of like getting a benefit for 2 for 1 in a sense. So that's just what I kind of think sometimes when we get into like that moon in Capricorn. And again, then the moon gets into a sextile with the sun, which again is a really nice harmonious aspect. It's that sense of getting back in alignment with the soul again, to see that like, okay, there was a bit of a bump there, after, starting off this cycle, but now we can get back on track. And get things moving. So something to think about. I think that's all I want to talk about on that one there. And then we get into Monday, the 27th of October. Moon's still chilling in Cap, moving about halfway through. But the nice thing is, at least we end on a green note here, because the moon will form a square with Venus, and that's going to happen at about 17 degrees and 47 minutes of Capricorn, at about 9:11, reach exactly about 9:11 p.m. So it's like, right, even though the moon is in this domicile of Saturn, it's in, and we will talk about the or the opposition with Jupiter in the next one, but at least it's in, now it's configured with the or with the benefics in this. And even it's getting even some hard or some harmonious aspects even with the malefics. If we're going to have them looking at the moon, at least let it be through a beneficial aspect, at least. So that's even kind of nice that the moon's, really actually configured to everything right now, And I think with the moon squaring Venus, the squares can be more tenser aspects. They're martial in nature. But this could be that kind of, again, that's sort of like, I think, tough love that's happening. Venus is coming through with the right words to say, hey, I understand you're going through these things, but when's the last time you scrubbed? I was looking, I remember when I was staying with this person for a bit, and I remember when I got in there, they were kind of, I think, kind of processing some things, and I was just like, one day I was just like, hey, how about we let's let some light in here. You got a great view of the sunrise by this, and let's bring in some things, and man, what a difference that made. They weren't maybe necessarily receptive to it at first, because there is, I think, and that could be the challenge with maybe a moon square Venus is, someone wanting to help, but someone not being receptive to it. Again, it's like maybe doing you can't force people to do things, but it's just like hey, let me come over and let me help you clean something. Let me help you do this out. Let's get some of this clutter out of here. Let's do something to help, or let's just get you outside. Come go for a walk with me. Okay, you ain't even got to get dressed. Let's put a hoodie and some sweatpants on. Let's do this thing. And I'm just talking about in extremes here. And again, apply it to your situation. But even though this is a square, it's with the benefics, and so there's this goodness that is trying to happen here. And let me go ahead and switch over. But there's this goodness that's trying to happen here. And I think that this is just a reminder that we all go through these chapters where things are just kind of tricky, we're maybe feeling a lot and blah, 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 blah. But it does get better, and I think that it does. And I think that it gets better too, especially when we have those people in our corner to help get us through that. And I think that's something that the benefics remind us too, that we're not alone in this. I think a lot of the times we feel like we have to do things by ourselves all the time, and if that were the case, then it would just be me doing this podcast just for the birds, So I think it's just something I think to think about there as we kind of wrap up, as we kind of end the week. I like that it's ending on a smooth note, and I think that the moon is right now in a even though in a tougher zodiac sign for it, it's still got this supporting things, that could, even through the challenging times, with. Because, those sextiles with the malefics, I don't ignore that. They're still the malefics, and they're still going to be challenging, but it's going to be more easy to tap into the constructive side of that and to rise out of that from that challenges, as opposed to let something just be challenging or just be a hard time. So just some things to think about as we move through this week. But yeah, that's all I got for you there. So hopefully you found that useful there. And just so I got to get better about talking about this, but there are timestamps in the beginning in this. So if you would, just so that if you want to go to each day, however you want to work with these resources, and if you want to support the work that I'm doing even further, I have a Patreon, and there's a link down in the description box below for that. And I'm going to start uploading these Lunar Shenanigans one on there, and like the monthly ones as like a free tier. And then I have two other tiers. One of them includes the Lucky Day podcast, which is my election podcast. It talks about election astrologies for that month, what are going to be the most auspicious days for that time for whatever endeavor that you're taking. And then the second one is a personalized transit report from me, so that you get on top of with the podcast as well there. So if that's something that you want to check out, then that information's down there for you. And also, and again, since it's Scorpio season, you got your sun in Scorpio, you are eligible to get a 10% off discount from me. So if you haven't booked with me before, so definitely check that out, or reach out to me on my email, which is also down there. Send you a link for them and get that all set up for you there. And that's just my consultations, cover whether we go over natal astrology, any sort of like transit things, whatever that might be looking like. So that's there for you. And then last thing, there is a couple of links for the playlist for the Lunar Shenanigans and for the Celestial News Monthly as well. And I also do this series where I do talk about different planetary placements in different zodiac signs in different houses, and what are some things to think about when you're navigating that in your natal chart there. So that's also available for you. All sorts of resources and goodies for you. But that's all I got there. So until next time, stay mindful out there. Well, you can't. Well, no, soon. We'll be able to see it soon. So you keep eyes on that moon. It doesn't take her long. And I will get you on the next one. Later.